Welcome to the Green Medicine Podcast. Today I'd like to welcome Sheryl J. Burchill. Sheryl is an Aboriginal artist living in the Daintree in far North Queensland. Sheryl completed formal studies in art in 2013 and she's participated in over 25 group shows since 2012. Her mediums are printmaking, painting, sculpture, drawing and installation. As a Kuku Yalnji woman, she draws on her culture to inspire and express her creativity. Welcome, Sheryl, and I'm just so happy to have you.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Barbara. When you first invited me, I was like, should I do this? But my spirit told me I needed to be here. So I'm really happy to be here.
Well, thank you. I feel very privileged to have this opportunity, to talk with you.
Yeah, I feel very privileged to actually be in your presence, Dal. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm aware that you use a range of materials and processes, including printmaking, drawing, painting and assemblage. Do you have a preference with the mediums that you use?
When I first started doing art, I would do a lot of paintings. So I had two sons and I had spare time being at home with my sons from work. So I started doing a lot of sketches and paintings. And then when I went back to work, I started doing Cert 3 and 4 in visual arts. And then I eventually went on to do a diploma in visual arts. And I did many workshops. But I found along the way I always loved textiles. The funny thing is I'm not doing textiles at the moment. I'm doing a lot of printmaking using etching plates. I'm enjoying seeing my art grow, though, along the way. Hopefully I'll get back to doing the textiles and the screen printmaking, though.
I suppose in any kind of art practice, so we change and, we experiment with different mediums.
Yeah, yeah. And I think every year, every day, every time is different. And you kind of go with the flow.
Yeah.
So I try to go with what I'm feeling at the time. And to me, doing art is like a healing or a meditation. So I believe my spirit takes on the energy it needs from the art when I'm producing them. So if I'm doing the etching plates, I do, say for example, I'm doing a basket. The fine lines that you've got to do to show the intricacy of basket weaving, to me, when I'm doing that, it's like meditating. So you forget about everything around you and you do these lines and you keep doing them and you keep doing them. But the end result is beautiful.
It's interesting when you sent me through some of your images from your prints. I was actually speaking to Jill about it and said, oh, this work is so beautiful. There's so much fineness and precision.
Yeah.
I noticed that in the strokes, in the images, in the baskets.
Yeah. So I did that over a year ago, those baskets. And at the time I had my mum living with me in my care. So I was doing a lot of bonding with my mum, even more so, as well as taking care of her, which is a huge role. So I was travelling to Cairns every fortnight. So that was my day out.
Wow.
And I used that. I used that then to kind of have my healing and my time. But it also, I found my spirit was producing all of this connectedness with my mum and my culture and the stories she was sharing with me at the time. So it was a beautiful time in my life.
So you've kind of almost answered my next question, actually, which is what's the message that you're trying to communicate in your art?
Yeah, it's basically everything that the elders in my family have shared to me over the years and still sharing, because we're blessed to still have them with us. I'm putting that beauty into the art. Eventually, I will tell more of their stories with their permission, but I believe the stories have been told by the images and the beauty in the art. Yeah.
Yeah, so sometimes we don't necessarily need the verbal aspect of saying the imagery. And that's what I felt when I was looking at your prints as well.
Yeah.
It was,
I hope and would like my art to speak for itself.
I think most artists would agree with you there.
Yeah.
I noticed too you use a lot of dragonfly imagery in your artwork.
Yeah.
Can you share what the significance of that is?
So years ago, I separated from my son's dad and I was going through a transition. And at the time when I picked up a pen and started drawing again, the dragonflies became a part of that journey. And I believe it's this transition of me going to wherever it is I'm meant to be going. So those dragonflies are flying with me. And I thought it was just for that part, but I found it's throughout my whole life now that these dragonflies and the affiliation I have with them are still there. So obviously it's a huge journey of sorts.
So when you think of dragonflies, what do you think of?
I think of transition and going from one thing to another. Because when I remember as a teenager going up to the gorge, you know, to swim and do all of that, or even just the local creeks. And when you're sitting on the rocks, you see these dragonflies darting from one thing to another. So they're moving around, and that's what my life is. You take on one project, then you go to another and another. So I feel like I'm this dragonfly doing that. But on saying that, I did say to Mum, what does the dragonfly mean in our culture? You know, what does it represent? And she said, the dragonflies, we call them wind tellers, because on a windy day you see clusters of them. So in our culture, it's wind tellers. But on my personal journey, I feel like it's transitions of things happening in my life.
Wow. And what's a wind teller?
So when you see them flying around, it's going to be a windy day. So it's one way of telling us the weather too, I suppose.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. So interesting.
Yeah. So you could probably put the two together too. So the wind teller telling us about the weather and what kind of a day it's going to be.
Wow.
For you as an individual, maybe.
Yeah.
Because if you sit and you be still, you look around at the energy in nature, it talks to you and it does share.
And I think that is really kind of deep in a way, because it's about the more we can connect with nature and the more that we can become still in nature, the more we get in touch with the language of nature.
Yeah, the more you get to listen.
And I'm also very interested in your thoughts about Jasper, because that was such a significant event in far North Queensland and had such a big impact on the environment and on people's lives.
Yeah, huge impact, you know, and we're still going through it. You look at the roads, they're still being worked on. You drive up the Cape Tribulation and you look at those once pristine creeks and rivers are now covered in red. And I've spoken to an elder of mine that lives in Burchill, Annie Frances Walker, and she was saying she went on that trip when the Cape Trib Road or Coastal Road reopened, and she said it's like the mountains were crying or bleeding, because now the rocks and the creeks are lined with this red soil. And I go out to the reef often with my partner and I look back onto the mountains, and where the heaviness of the clouds and all of the rain fell, it's like our region has been through a battlefield. I always looked back at the mountains and I always thought to me they remind me of these huge entities, either dragons or lizards or something, but I felt like they were guardians of this region. And I look at them now and I see so many battle scars, which are all the landslips. I felt sorry at first when I saw that, and I was like, oh, it's devastating, you know. But now I feel like there's a shift coming of sorts where maybe Mother Nature's waking up. She's waking up and waking everybody else up.
Yeah. I was just going to say, and waking us up. Because where I live as well, at Oak Beach, we've got mountains, you know, behind us. And with the amount of water that we had too, we've actually got scars now on the mountain, and it's so profound. And from the beach, when I walk on the beach, I often say to people, look up at the mountains. It looks like a dragon to me. It looks like I really feel very protected, but I can feel the energetic of a being there.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting to talk with you about this, because I think this is something that we don't talk about very often.
No.
And also because maybe most people aren't, you know, very connected to the natural environment, so we don't perhaps give ourselves the opportunity to experience what's there and what's trying to talk to us.
Or even see it
And
when it's right there in front of us. But we get so busy in our lives, our mundane lives, if you like, where we get caught up in a rut. We don't see the beauty on the changes that's actually happening. And everyone whinges about this and that, but really we should just stop and go with the flow.
And also accept that these changes that have actually occurred are creating changes in our lives as well, which I think are going to be very positive.
Yeah. After the cyclone had come through and after months of everything coming back to what we call normal, I'd been out on the reef with my partner and I looked back and, you know, I'd mentioned that there were a lot of scarring and all of the landslips, but I didn't mention that I started counting them all. And I stopped counting after 50.
Wow.
So from, say, maybe Mossman up to Woodgill, I counted 50 and stopped at that. I couldn't see the landslips on the mountains behind what I could see, so there were obviously more. And then one day I travelled by boat to go for lunch at Yorkeys Knob, and I started counting all of the landslips from Daintree down to Palm Cove. I stopped counting at 20. I've since read that there are over 100 landslips that had come from Jasper. So to me, that's change. That's Mother Nature taking back what's hers, making a stance. And if we're in tune and if we're listening and we stop delving into our poor me, we'll see and go with that shift and allow that change to come naturally. I know a lot of people were displaced, which is really sad.